Um, and we will make a start because we've got a lot of ground to cover. I think everybody can hear me. Hopefully you can. Welcome and thank you for joining this month's fraud session. Just by way of intros to kick us off. So some of you might not know me. I'm Oliver Crofton. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Meysey. I have spent 15 years of my career working in digital forensics and e-crime investigations. I've worked across multiple different industries, but tends to be around SME fraud, small to medium-sized business fraud. And I've worked in-house within a law firm, chasing the bad guys as well. Beginning of last year, I was working on a case that involved a suicide. And at that point, I had just had enough of dealing with the aftermath of fraud and decided there's got to be a better way because the cases I was working on were predominantly preventable. And it was just disheartening to see the lack of follow-up and the lack of arrests that were being made on the work that we were doing in the investigations. So I turned it on its head, joined my business partner, and we built a tool to work within cloud accounting software to combat the risk of fraud. So I've seen hundreds of investigations, and I'm probably just to scratch the surface in terms of what Paul's experience is like. And I'm going to hand the mic over to Paul just to give a quick introduction from your side.
Thanks, Oliver. Morning, everyone. I'm Paul Stratton, also known as my company's called The Fraud Nerd. Blame my wife for that one. It used to be an insult. That's what she used to call me, and now it's memorable. So she made me become a limited company with that name. I've had quite a very fortunate career, really. I spent 22 years with Merseyside Police. I dealt with everything from usual street crime to undercover work, counter-terrorism and extremism intel, and also as a detective in the economic crime team, investigating the kind of frauds Oliver was talking about there. And I had the same frustrations as Oliver. I left in 2020 and moved to Liverpool City Council as their lead in fraud and corruption, developing their brand new strategies, brand new training programs. And then I spent 3.5 years there. I did some part-time training and mentoring of other investigators, but then left on my own. So now on my own, I'm the smallest company, just me and my dog, the smallest company in Europe. And I provide training both for private companies. I also am contracted to the City of London Police. I train police detectives all over the country how to investigate fraud, and I do a lot of prevention training as well. So it's the invite, anything that can give me half an hour to talk about fraud, I'm always happy to help.
Great.
Thanks, Oliver.
Thank you very much, Paul. So just to set the scene and just get us started, I'm keen just to unpick what fraud is in terms of commercial, occupational, business fraud. So just to set the scene, Paul, can you give us an outline on what fraud actually is in this context?
Yeah. A friend of mine calls fraud a posh theft. I think it demeans it a little bit, but at the time, I think he was just trying to insult me because I got my nice new role in the fraud squad and he didn't. But what we're talking about when we talk about fraud, we're talking about deception. That's what we're talking about, deception. So fraud itself is all about someone deceiving somebody else in order to make a gain. And obviously, mostly financial, but it can only be financial or property. So it differs to theft in that point that sometimes Oliver could just walk into a shop, take something off the shelf, doesn't belong to him, he's not going to give it back. That's theft. It's just slightly more complex with fraud, but not much at all. So it can be committed in three main ways. And the first one's called false representation. And that's just a lie. That's when you receive, everyone does it. When you receive one of those messages or emails from someone pretending to be from your bank and wants you to click a link or provide information, that is a false representation. It's just a lie. We generally call that cybercrime, but that sounds we're giving them too much credit. It's just a lie over an email. Then we also have another one called failing to disclose information. That is, for example, if you go for car insurance and there's a box where you've got to put your points in and you don't put it in. If you have to do that in law and you fail to do that, you're obviously causing a loss to the insurance company. and probably a loss to other people as well whose prices go up. But that's another way we can do it. And finally, is a more internal way of doing things, a fraud by abuse of position. So this is where you get people inside your company, usually very trusted people as well who've worked there for a while, who end up stealing. For example, who end up, instead of moving money to clients, they divert it to their own, which unfortunately we do see more and more of lately. So they're the main three ways. Your false representation, just a posh way of saying it's a lie. It's a way of not disclosing information when you should do, when you're under a legal duty to. And ultimately, it can be about that internal abuse of position, that abuse of trust and access to information. For example, something as simple as diverting payments. A lot of people, there's a lot of words for fraud, but deception is the one. So when you hear people fall for scams, I don't subscribe to that. People don't fall for scams, they're deceived by criminals. And as Oliver said, it's not just a business crime or a white collar crime. It's horrifically harmful. But yeah, sorry to be a bit of a downer there, Oliver. But yeah, it is a horrible, horrible thing. So it's lovely to see we have webinars like this that try and sort of give that bit of awareness.
It is. It is a terrible thing. It's like somebody's been ransacked your knicker drawer, as a sort of example. I was told once on a case where it's the most intimate part, especially when it's digital. The most intimate part of your business has been exposed to somebody that shouldn't have been there and have stolen funds. A question on those three types of fraud. Do they have the same motivation for the purpose? Does the perpetrator have the same motivation? And what have you seen the differences in those motivations? Why people commit fraud?
That's a lovely question. It's a big question as well. There's a long held concept around pressures and motivation, that it's a need or it's a greed. So with the cost of living at the moment, with the fact that we're still not out of COVID, we've still got problems. People have still lost their jobs. A friend of mine yesterday I spoke to applied for over 100 jobs, got 4 interviews. There's a real problem there for people. So sometimes the motivation is that need. And it is that need as well. It's I've got bills to pay, I've got children, my partner or whoever it is, my codependents have lost their jobs, who've got no money coming in. So they find ways of doing it. And with that, what we find more so is the internal fraud, where there's a genuine need. We do find that with internal fraud. With external fraud, it's more of a greed. That's when we're dealing with criminals per se. This is not they have larceny in their heart, Oliver. They just want to steal stuff. They just want to come in and steal data so they can use it to deceive people. They want to come in and try and change bank accounts and divert money. But the main pressures are usually around that. You either have pure criminality, which was obviously we're seeing billions, just billions going out the door for that, or you have the more need. So that's why it's important to know your staff, to have that support in place and have honest conversations with your staff members. Because I know it's an old cliche, but I've seen it time and time again. Fraud turns people bad. It's a very short answer to a very long-term problem. And I know everyone's heard that kind of cliche before, but in fraud, more than ever. So yeah, need or greed generally falls into those categories.
Okay. You touched on something there, which I just want to unpick a little bit, because there are some statistics from the UK government that there's been a 24% increase in reported fraud cases from 2022 to 2024. So there's been a huge jump really since the tail end of COVID to now. And you mentioned about unemployment and cost of living somewhat. What societal changes do you think is driving that uptick in fraud that we're now seeing? Even the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners came out with a stat that they reckon now 5% of revenue is lost to fraud by businesses every year. This huge number just going out the door that people aren't aware of. What's driving that, Paul?
Yeah, it's accessibility and ease of transactions, really. We want to make it easier, don't we? We've got desperately want to make it easy for people. And certainly people who are less tech savvy, another phrase we use quite a lot, that they're doing now, having to do contracts online, or if you get a loan, or if you sign up to an accountancy firm or whichever firm it is, it's a lot of digital things in place. And it's getting that balance right. And sometimes we don't get it right between making it nice and smooth for our clients, bringing them in, making sure they can sign up, making sure you have software and things in place, but still doing that due diligence, as it were, still having that protection in place. We like things nice and easy, don't we? And we're so used to answering emails quickly that sometimes we just don't check where they've come from. We don't check the provenance of the email. We don't hover over the email address, for example, to see if it's come from a fraudster or not. And I think the society we've got now, because and there is some pushback to a completely digital world. People will still use cash for budgeting reasons, but we want things really quickly. And where things are quick, I can't tell you, it just plays into the hands of the fraudster, because fraud is all about people. It's not about AI, machine learning, and cyber. It's about people. Someone's got to press a button. Someone must be the victim. And unfortunately, in work as well, internally, I've seen, well, I got this email at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and so I just pressed the button because I wanted it done. We're all busy because there's less of us. So that quickness, that ease of information is what's driving a lot of problems for us. But you need your preventions and detection tools there. If it takes a bit longer to do something and it involves money and data, so be it. I know it's not ideal, it's easy for me to say, but so be it, because I'd rather my staff take a few more hours checking something and finding out that fraud, and then just sending it through, rather than sending it through quickly because they think that's what people want, and having to explain why we just lost 50 grand or just lost someone's data.
I completely agree. I think so is one of those pressures then coming from clients where, as an accountancy practice or bookkeeping practice, we expect that fast turnaround from clients and that instant response any time of day almost, that actually the ability to check every email address that comes in is actually legitimate. There's not a spelling mistake in the domain name now. Is actually it's quite frankly not possible, especially on your phone. You're on the go. You're trying to reply to five clients in a 15-minute window in between meetings. It seems that's become less achievable, and also we are now working remotely on the go. Perhaps we don't have the structure that we and the colleagues around us to check things with, that quick conversation over, did you get that email as well from the client? How does remote working how has it impacted? Have you seen anything around?
It's had a huge impact. Working from home, well, we all know it was massive change for me as a police officer. It was only when I moved to the council, went to the council 2 months later and worked from home, never done it in my life. So we didn't have the systems in place. Now we're moving towards where everyone, it's 365, we've got Teams, we've got Teams, so we're a little more secure with SharePoint, we're starting to get around it. But the problem you've got working from home is you've got no one there to ask the questions to. And as you said, if everyone's busy and you can't get them on the Teams call, or you can't get them over the WhatsApp, then you'll probably just do it. And it's understandable why you would, because as you say, you've got 10 calls there. But working from home raises a number of issues. In the more technical sense, people using Wi-Fi's in public spots. So going to Nero, using the guest in Nero, but actually it isn't. All I've done is I've sat next to you because I'm the fraudster. I changed my Wi-Fi name to Nero Guest, and you're logging into mine. So now I can sort of get some kind of control, but that's a technical side of thing. But working from home, it's just changed how we work. I hate using the word silos. We hear it quite a lot, but we're sort of on our own. We get some of us quite like that, and some of us don't. But one thing I will say, working with apprentices, I coach and train for counter fraud apprentices, and they spend time at home. And when someone's new to a firm, they need that support there. They absolutely need that support. Now, whether that is to make sure they've got all the checklists in place, all the policies, and they're aware of them, they've had that training on policies, or whether it's that they're buddied up with someone who says, okay, when you're working from home, any issues, so-and-so's in the office, or go to other people, there has to be that support there. Because what people call about fraud and error, fraud isn't always just, as it says, being scammed. It's not, you're being deceived. So, or you can make an error because you're trying to rush things through. And the fraudsters know this. And there's a thing called social engineering, which is it's just lies. Well, they'll ring you up and they'll push you. They'll push you and they'll say, oh, Oliver's told me to do this. And they know you work with me because you're on LinkedIn and we're friends on LinkedIn and we're on there. So they'll do a bit of research and they'll target people as well. But yeah, working from home, even little things like, people can record Teams meetings, other people can listen in without anyone else knowing. Little things like that. The more sinister side of it as well. It's tough, Oliver. It's really tough.
Mm.
Working from home. So we do trust quite rightly, we trust our staff, but we've got to protect them and support them at the same time.
One thing you mentioned there, Paul, I think we got to about 11 minutes in, and you mentioned buzzword bingo of AI, and I think we just need to pick that up because one of the changes that has happened from a technological standpoint that we've seen from a techie side of things is the advancement on generative AI has made it really easy for fraudsters to imitate websites, to create fake invoices, to write emails eloquently and even in line with a customer or type of language and expressions that you would normally see a particular person use. And even voice imitation now is becoming really advanced. That we've seen cases where video calls have been done by AI purporting to be somebody that they're not. So there's a lot of noise around AI and quite often it's just a buzzword. But in this instance of fraud, fraudsters are smart and they are using AI to their benefit. And I think from just to match in with the societal changes you've talked about, just from a technology standpoint, we've certainly seen more advancement in the capability of fraudsters.
Well, one of the things, and you're absolutely spot on, and people shouldn't fear AI too much because we're making a huge. Absolutely, it's going to change it. We know it's going to change everything. So for example, when I do sessions to finance, to payments, anyone who handles money and personal data, I show them what we call mandate fraud. It's where someone pretends to be. We work with ABC Limited. We get an email that looks like it's from ABC Limited asking for our bank accounts to be changed. And as you said, when we read it, it doesn't quite read right. But people get deceived because they're busy. They don't check where it's from. They assume it is from ABC and they don't stick to their policies. That happens. We know that. But there's times when, even when you look at you read it, it's what we call good, bad English. And they have grammar. Now, that's just a warning sign. That doesn't mean now anyone can work for your company or mine anywhere around the world, and English may not be their first language. So it's just a warning sign. It doesn't mean that that's a fraudster. But what AI is doing, especially with the likes of ChatGPT, and I use this on my sessions, and we go through it and we write an email from a fraudster, and I use a friend of mine who's from Ukraine to write in his English or her English. So again, it doesn't matter. If I put a perfect paragraph in to say to ChatGPT, create me an email to Oliver Crofton there in a professional tone, asking for our bank account details to be changed, ask if it's done a matter of urgency, it will just come up with a perfect template to use. When I put in the Ukrainian sort of good, bad English, if you like, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing, the same outcome. And as you said, all I have to do, Oliver, is email you a couple of times about a job. So I'll email you a few weeks before. Here's my CV. I'm looking for a job. And we might have a to and fro in. You may use certain words to sign off. Yeah. Kind regards, laters, ciao for now, whatever it is. Yeah. Whatever it is. I'll pick up on that. And what I'll do, I'll feed those emails into ChatGPT and said, this is Oliver Crofton. I want you to speak like he does on those emails. And you don't get it perfect, but I'll tell you what, it'll deceive you. It will. And that's where it's all about. That's where we're going. But I can't stress enough. If you have the right training or awareness in place, if you have the right processes in place, all you need to do is what I call fear change. Have your processes in place for everything. Then they can send as much perfect AI emails as they want. Fact is, you're not going to change that bank account unless you have a Teams call with them. And of course, we have other kinds of AI as well, but we're putting in blocks all the way. We're trying to put in prevention measures all the way. But it's a massive worry because what they can do with it, it's fine. I use it, it's absolutely incredible and it will deceive a lot of people.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you just on that point, Paul, I think any prevention measure is about layers. there is no silver bullet that's going to stop fraud. And any security product, any security measure you put in place for a physical building, right? It's all, you lock your windows, you have a burglar alarm, you have CCTV. It's all about layering, and that's just security good practice.
Absolutely.
Over my career, I've dealt with hundreds of investigations, as I said, and there's always a common theme. And you mentioned Friday night, and that tended to be when we got the phone call that there's been a breach, or there's been a fraud discovered, and can we investigate? Usually on a bank holiday weekend. When dealing with business owners or senior people within SMEs, there was I always had a comment of, I didn't think this was going to happen to us, or I didn't think they were capable of doing this to us. And there was a case reported in the BBC this week of a grandmother that had defrauded a school that she worked at for, I think, 7 or 8 years. She was working there, good friends with all the other staff, but she had siphoned off £70,000 over the course of a few years. I think sadly she was in an abusive relationship, and her partner may have a drug problem or something. But you see the photo of her, and she's a lovely old lady, really, and you sort of think, how can this person be defrauding them? But you don't know what happens behind closed doors. And with business owners, particularly small business owners, where they have that false sense of control, and they think, well, this won't happen to me. I know all my staff members. We as Meysey, when we developed our tool, I knew I was going to have the problem of trying to convince lots of business owners to adopt our software. So we made the decision, right, we need to partner with trusted advisors, and in our case, working with accountants and bookkeepers, in order to get the message of fraud out to clients, out to end users. What is your opinion on the collective responsibility that advisors have for their clients, and how have you seen anywhere where it's worked well in terms of but maybe government organizations or anywhere else where working collaboratively is stronger, and that actually it's not just down to the SME owner to look after their own fraud, it's almost a neighborhood watch style setup that professional advisors to that SME have a responsibility to support them as well. What's your opinion on that?
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right, because you can't do it without information and information share. We used to use the word in police, and they still do, intelligence sharing. I never really knew what it meant. Effectively, it just means sending an email to your mate in the other police station saying, watch out for this fraud, or watch out for that person, go and arrest them. And it's not solely down. We know that. We know directors, we know owners they've got to safeguard finances and their people. But it's good you pointed on that fraud, because I always start off when I'm training, especially in councils, and you're training councillors or you're training senior managers. This is not about trust. You're not here because you're not trusted. You're here because your role attracts untrustworthy people. It's the same with accountancy. There's so much personal data there. Just give me a laptop and a Starbucks Wi-Fi, and I'll be sending emails out all day. But it isn't, and there is always that sort of pushback at first. Oh, no, there's no way they could have done that. I wouldn't have expected that. But you don't know what's going on in people's lives. And you raised a good thing about gambling as well. Gambling is massive. I can't remember ever looking at a suspect's bank account and not seeing tons of transactions, £5 to Gibraltar, £5 to Jersey, where all the betting firms are. You see it constantly. So we knew that was probably a bit of a pressure and a motivation as well. And a motivation. When you're advised by any chance you've got to influence the awareness of a client, to influence the awareness and just raise awareness, because that's all it is. Letting them know about things is wonderful. In the public sector, we would send out fraud alerts. So everyone would sign up to it's a national sort of database. And what would happen is, if someone reported a fraud in Liverpool City Council, they would send that email and a copy of the fraudulent email out to every other council, or they put it on their website so people could look at it every few weeks, and it just keeps them going. But it's hard to get over that, Oliver, thing of trust. Every time you go to a corporation, say you're being defrauded by someone, they've worked here for 20 years. I'd have never have thought that they had all this authority, and they finally abused it, mainly because they just wanted to. Mainly, we're always a criminal and just didn't have the opportunity. But I always use the the example of Margaret Buckley, who's 76, and she worked for a very small parish council. And over the space of a few years, she defrauded them out of £230,000. And as it's not, it was the least complex fraud ever. It's only fairly recently. She got councillors to sign blank checks for her and then just cashed them in her name. And that was it. And it was 120 checks in total. Now, the councillors shouldn't have done that, but in their minds, well, we trust Margaret. She's been around for years. She's the parish clerk. Why wouldn't we? And that's just a total lack of understanding. We're not saying mistrust everyone. We're not. It's about understanding the risk that the role brings, not just the person as well, and making sure they've got everything they have, that they're confident. They're dealing with emails all day and phone calls from people. They can sort of spot a few red flags. But yeah, trust, it's tough, Oliver. Trust, it's horrible, because as a business owner, you'll push back because you won't believe it, and you shouldn't, because you think, we're nice people, but people have pressures. People have pressures.
Unfortunately, subjectivity doesn't help with relationships when you're looking at trying to prevent fraud. Just on that point about simplicity, there was a case fairly recently, and it popped up in the news again, of a chap who defrauded Google and Facebook of over 100 million just by sending them invoices purporting to be one of their suppliers, and again creating documents and contracts that looked legit, and actually managed to get lots of invoices paid. And it's not complex. Not complex. Just sending.
We call it, but that is a sophisticated. They'll probably say it. A sophisticated cyber fraud, sophisticated cyber attack. It's not. It's a lie on an email.
Yeah,
that's what it is. A lie on an email. I know I'm oversimplifying it, and it can be very good, but that's what it is. But with just some awareness, that some process in place, they wouldn't have to worry about that.
Just as we move into just diving into what accountants and bookkeepers can do to reduce fraud for their clients, I'm just going to tell everybody just that you can use the Q&A button in the Zoom software if you've got any questions that you want us to pick up. We have allowed 5 minutes at the end just to run through any questions, but please do ask any questions, and we'll pick those up in a moment when we move on to the final Q&A part. But Paul, I think we could do this two ways. I'm happy to run through some of the technology side of things in terms of what attendees can do to combat fraud for their clients and their own practices from a tech standpoint. But so from a general good governance standpoint, what are the sort of top 3 or 4 things that you suggest people do, and what are the signs to look out for that, in bite-sized chunks, people can inform their clients that this is what they should be doing. And if you can just run us through some of those good governance best practices, people would appreciate it.
I think the first one, especially when you're dealing with clients, is when they receive emails to change things reporting to be from you, or even vice versa, to change bank details, to change even contact numbers. Because we think, well, look, it's just a contact number. But the next week, what will happen is they'll try and commit a fraud. And when you go and check, you'll use the new contact number, but you're actually talking to the fraudster. They do the work. So it's all about make sure they're aware at the start, because accountants, solicitors, anyone in this kind of sector, you have so much valuable data. Even if you don't have any money, you've got the data there that I need to commit fraud against your clients. If I can get to you, I can get to your client. So the first thing I'll be saying to clients is, okay, you'll be dealing with me from this email address. If you do get any kind of contact from anyone else here, give me a ring the office, or send me an email and craft. So it's all about clarity of communication, really. I think the second thing to worry about is the social engineering side, really. It's just the basic people ringing up, because we expect it on emails. We expect fraud to come in on emails. We're really going back in time, and we're going more analog. We're going back to phone calls now. So they may send an email in to you saying this, that, and the other, or someone might ring you, say, well, I'm actually acting on behalf of, or I'm a friend of so-and-so. They can't come to the phone today, but they've asked me to do this for them. And that's just a bit of social engineering. It's just playing detective. I'm not saying you're going to call rugby tackle people virtually, obviously, or call them a liar over the phone. But you've got to make sure that the people you speak to, and I know it sounds obvious, but this is how they do it. oh, right, no problem. They can't come to the phone or wherever, or I'm acting on their behalf. Next minute, you're starting to send them information. It's really important that from the start, any changes, it's like number one, any changes in communication or phone call is real, there's loads of due diligence done on it. Loads of due diligence done on it. Otherwise, you're letting them in. But the third, I think, just for accountants and both for clients, but probably more so for the people on this call, just be wary of those emails asking you to click a link. Someone's CV lands in your email box. We're all going to read a CV. That's how I do it. If I want to introduce a bit of malicious software in and infect your computer, I'd send my CV in, because even if we don't work in HR, we've got no jobs, we're nosy and we're
Yeah,
going to
we
click it.
we used to do testing, so to test the resilience of fraud against the
Yeah,
business. And one thing or the two things that worked. One of them was sending in, you've been headhunted. We're
yeah,
a recruitment agency, which obviously you can spin up a website in no time. Really like to talk to you. Can we have a chat and flatter somebody so that they then go into their private email account, and perhaps there's
yeah,
less security around a Gmail or a Yahoo account. And the other thing was sending around pay review files. So that always got a lot of clicks, where there was a pay review as if it had been sent to them in error of everyone's pay review, and that always got.
we want to know. Or I know that the best one that's been used that I've seen was, oh, thank you for that information. You're whistleblowing about your manager. Thank you for that. I've written up the phone call about all the complaints you have. It's on the attached Word document. It shouldn't have come to you. Obviously, people click it because they want to know what they're saying about it. It doesn't even mention any names, but they
No.
do. But unfortunately, that's what it's not. Again, you're not falling for a scam. You're being deceived. This is what they do. They have more time than you to plan this. But it's about just getting that bit of awareness is and agreeing with the clients, first of all, how are you going to communicate? And if there's a change for them to think, oh, it's a bit strange, why so and so? Because they could just spoof your email quite easily.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot. It's not easy, but as long as you make your checks, as long as you're a bit suspicious and fear any kind of change, you should be okay.
Paul, we spoke previously about a case, and this reflects SMEs often don't have large teams doing different segregation
No, no,
duties. And we spoke about a case where I think the perpetrator was found because she went on holiday and someone else picked it up. And we were asked, someone spoke to me about at a conference earlier this year, and she had a similar case where the crime had been going on, where somebody was creating fake invoices and paying themselves over the course of a 2-3 year period. And actually, they were sacked for something else. But then when someone else took over, they realized, oh, she'd
yeah.
also been siphoning off money. How can you, with limited resources, what can you do around improving that resilience if the same person who's procuring suppliers is also paying their invoices? How do
Yeah,
you?
you've got to divide it. You have to divide it. That protects your staff as well from making mistakes with money. I had a case very similar where there was just no, it's what we call segregation of duties, but what it is making sure somebody else can check, making sure it's part of the process. Yes, it may take longer, but I know you'd rather take a few more hours longer than having to explain to a client why you've lost money, or lost their data. And it was a solicitor in a personal injury. And what they had is they were able to tell the payments team where these payouts, when they got secured a payout at court, they could say, send it to this bank.
Mhm.
So when I went in there, I couldn't believe it. And this was across a huge solicitors firm, UK wide. And I said, well, why have they why have they said, why haven't you just got right from the start? Why haven't the payments team got the bank accounts for the client? The case handler doesn't need that. You need that. So they don't even have it. And all they say is the end, please send them the money. And that's it. So they've got no say whatsoever on where it goes.
Yeah.
So they changed it, and it was a quick change, it really was. But as you see, just simple processes in place, making sure not everyone can sort of QA and authorize.
Mm.
If it was overtime, it'd have to go to somebody. So why isn't something like an invoice where
Mm.
paying out thousands of pounds, why isn't that going to somebody as well? You've got to break the chain. You really have. Otherwise, we used to call it you open the door. When someone retired from the police, we were scared to open the door in case there was some crime reports in there. that hadn't been, what am I going to take over here? And it's exactly the same. It always happens. They went on leave, someone new comes in, fresh pair of eyes and says, doesn't look right. Then it all unravels from there. But just a few basic tick boxes on a checklist something as basic that can really help.
Right, we've got a couple of questions here, but I just want to touch on that other point as well around just from a technology perspective, what we can do within the industry. The growing technology stack that are available to accountants and bookkeepers now is brilliant from a efficiency, cost saving perspective. There are now tools that can scan invoices, receipts, and automate the whole accounts payable process almost all the way through. And in some respects, those types of tools and that tooling does help with the segregation of duties, because you're using software rather than an individual to do some of the work around invoicing uploads, and there's less scrutiny, less human interaction required. So the one person that's doing the sourcing of suppliers can also potentially not required to do the uploading of those invoices. But that also creates the potential of some concealment around fraud, where there is less scrutiny, or there's the perception of less scrutiny, which I think is also a factor just to be considered when we're looking at what tools to implement within the tech stack. Efficiency is great, and there's lots of pressures within the industry around staffing and resourcing and that requirement to be more efficient. But also, if you're going to, from a fraudster's perspective, if I'm looking to defraud the business that I work for, if I know that as soon as I click a button, no one's going to check it until it's paid.
Yeah, that's right.
You almost think, there's that fear of getting caught is greatly reduced. And I think that's just a fact to consider from a tech standpoint. Paul, we've got two questions that I just want to rattle off before we finish up. We've got 3 minutes before we let everyone get on with their Fridays. One of the questions here is, are there any industries that are most susceptible to fraud?
Every single one. Every single one. There's nothing that's more susceptible, as it were. More popular, definitely. Local authorities, solicitors, accountants, anyone with personal data, and especially personal business data that I can then exploit and use. They really are. So there's no one, because sometimes you're just an email address, doesn't matter what you call, they're not going to look you up, they're just sending out random emails. Yeah. But now we're starting to see in the public sector, local authorities, because they have everything. Yeah. Hackney was hacked. It's awful. The NHS example with its old software, but we're seeing more and more. And recently, around accountants, there's a 300% uplift, 3% rise in frauds after COVID. That was only last year as well, that report, and also solicitors as well. Solicitors are having a huge issues at the moment because we protect our money. We're good at protecting money, not so good at protecting data, and that's what I need as a fraudster as well. Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, from my side, just anecdotally, we seem to be working on more construction fraud cases. The construction industry was quite susceptible because there's a lot of backhanders and a lot of bid rigging and things like that, particular within that sector. And it seems manufacturing as well, where you've got like high degrees of suppliers, tends to be quite high for fraud, just from my personal perspective, to answer that question as well. And then the final question, Paul, which is definitely pointed more towards you, and you're not there anymore, so you can talk about it. But why don't the police want to know? And I'll just give you the one stat, which I know you're going to tell us, is fraud makes up 40% of all crime in the UK, but only has 1% of the police budget. Why is that, Paul?
What a question. I know I get asked this all the time. Do you know what, from a practical point of view, an experience point of view, especially coming from Merseyside, we have murders, stabbings, horrific sexual assaults, we have massive drug dealing, we have overwhelming poverty. We've got finite resources over austerity, cut our numbers to the bone. And I mean that, and it's the same in councils as well. When you do report a fraud, if it is investigated, I promise you, we do it really well. We take a lot of pride in it, we take it a lot personally, but I understand. We have to prioritize at times. We have to prioritize. So we're doing less Now, though, Merseyside, for example, go on harm. Whether you've lost 500 quid or 5 million, that doesn't, obviously it matters, but to us, it's what harm is caused. If that 5 million quid is lost by a multi-billion pound company, why didn't they stop it? They should have their own internal, but it's hard for individuals, I know. The stats look horrific. They do, but remember, that could just be a message that's sent to you and you report it. Doesn't mean that everyone's being caused loss. But my main advice is if you do go and you do report to Action Fraud, if it's urgent and you are still in danger of losing money, contact your bank straight away, try and get it back. I know this sounds obvious, but just ring 101. Ring 101. Okay. They may tell you to go to Action Fraud, but please say this might be still in action. But I'm sorry, I think it's just down to staffing and huge priorities. There's still a bit of a hangover that fraud's not harmful, and it absolutely is. But compared to sort of some of the murders we've seen and officers having to go on there and terrorism, I'm sorry, it's still in police leaders' minds, fraud ranks lower down. Until we get past that, we're not going to get the resources we need, I'm afraid. So I've got no
Well,
great
it
answer.
was a tough question, Paul. I thought you handled it very well, very diplomatically.
Yeah.
We're going to
Yeah.
wrap up there. I'd just like to say thank you very much, Paul, for your time. I think
Welcome.
you've
Anytime.
made a very complex subject very easy to understand. And I think describing fraud as a posh theft at the start was a magical soundbite that will be used by me many times moving forward.
Yeah.
How can people get hold of you if there's some fraud training requirements? How do they reach
LinkedIn, Paul Stratton on LinkedIn, or I'm at thefraudnerd.com or paul@fraudnerd.com. But please, I'm on LinkedIn there. Either search The Fraud Nerd or Paul Stratton and you'll see me there, Fraud Nerd Limited.
Wonderful.
So yeah, anything training, awareness, whatever it is, please, anything I can help with, just let me know.
Great. Thank you very much. And if anyone attended, thank you very much for coming, joining us today. I hope it's been useful. We will be running another session next month with a guest speaker, so we will keep you informed once that's all sorted. But for now, enjoy your weekend. Thank you again, Paul, and hope you can join us again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.